Royal Debutante. The introduction of the Princess Royal class was made in a blaze of publicity, with the LMS determined to grab headlines across the country. This newsreel, complete with some beautiful shots of Princess Royal at speed, perfectly captures the spirit of excitement and anticipation that could be engendered in 1933 by the launch of a new class of locomotive.
This is Britain's most powerfulest engine, built by the London, Midland and Scottish Railway for hauling the heavy Scots trains between Euston and Glasgow.
It is the maiden journey of the new locomotive on the LMS Scottish Run. The engine has been named after Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, and she is expected to break all records.
The Princess Royal class. Among the most elegant and popular of steam engines, the locomotives of the Princess Royal class graced the West Coast Main Line right up until 1962. Today, the class is represented by two of its earliest members, number 6001 Princess Elizabeth and number 6002 Princess Margaret Rose. In 1933, the sound of number 6200 Princess Royal and number 6201 Princess Elizabeth's Caledonian-style hooters announced the launch of William Stanier's locomotives on the West Coast Main Line. Stanier's priority on arrival from Swindon was to design and build a class of locomotives that could run from Euston to Glasgow over the northern gradients with trains weighing up to 500 tons. The first two engines experienced some steaming problems, which were quickly and very successfully remedied before number 6203 Princess Margaret Rose was built in 1935. It is only thanks to the dedicated efforts of volunteers that the spectacle of a princess fighting the grades of Ribblesdale can still be seen in the 21st century. None of this class was scheduled for preservation as part of the National Collection of Historic Locomotives drawn up in the last years of steam, an incredible omission. Two very regal ladies lie in waiting, giving us the opportunity to compare the later build of number 6203 Princess Margaret Rose, the first locomotive built after extensive boiler modifications to improve steaming capacity, with number 6201 Princess Elizabeth herself, which received these modifications after initial testing. Due to number 6201's high profile, the whole class, officially named Princess Royal, became affectionately known as Lizzie's. The superbly proportioned appearance of these locomotives led to their being modelled by Bassett-Loke, Hornby, Hornby-Dublow, Rovex, Triang, and others. Here, driver Tom Clark, who drove Princess Elizabeth on her 1936 record-breaking run, is seen looking at one of the class with a school-uniformed enthusiast clutching his O-gauge model. Roger Bell of the 6201 Trust describes the purchase of the engine. It cost about the same amount as the model might now fetch at auction.
There was a realization that so many really famous engines were just not going to be with us any longer, which appalled me. Fortunately, A.B. MacLeod was the supplies and contracts manager of the London Midland region at that time, and he was an enthusiast, and I'm sure viewed the request sympathetically, or as sympathetically as he could in his official position. And in due course he wrote back and said that although they normally disposed of engines by contract, he would sell us Princess Elizabeth for £2,160, delivered to where we wished. But then there was a nightmare of where we put this huge engine, because the route availability was so restricted. Doughty's had an annual open day, and they said yes, they would start a railway society if they could get an engine. So this is where we came into it. We said yes, we will provide an engine so that your society can get off the ground. Ken Vincent was the leading light of that, and we thought yes, Ashchurch would be possible, mainline connection, and BR agreed that they would bring the engine to Ashchurch. To our amazement, the engine came in steam as far as Birmingham, and then the rods were taken off and it was worked as a goods train from Saltley. One wintry day, this huge engine arrived with its guards van at Ashchurch, and it was ours. In fact, we were so desperate that we didn't think of having the engine without the tender, because we just couldn't afford the tender. We formed a society at that stage because it was obvious that someone would be required to care for it. And one of the first votes we had was in what condition we would keep it. And the two front runners were LMS condition of the record run, and the other was BR Blue, actually, with shades, I suppose, of running on the Caledonian Railway, because it was very much the old Caledonian Railway. And fortunately at that time turned up amongst the volunteers at Ashchurch at long last our first engineer, Tony Seagrave. Now Tony had served his time at Crewe, and there he turned up at Tewkesbury, someone who'd served his time at Crewe. Marvellous.
As we can see, the LMS Red Livery won, and the Princess Elizabeth Locomotive Society made a superb job of restoring the engine to mainline running condition. It moved base from Ashchurch to Bulmers in Hereford. This superb winter view enables us to see the separate dome and top feed that formed some of the class's modifications, along with increased superheating, a larger firebox combustion chamber, and the Stanier pattern tender. The Princess Royal class appeared to evolve from the GWR King class, but with modifications to allow the loco to cope with the longer gradients of the LMS. Stanier always acknowledged his debt to Swindon. He is reported to have said, "The seat of my pants has got GWR embroidered in it." There was one further prototype, number 6202, nicknamed the Turbomotive, probably the world's most successful turbine engine. Built with a Metropolitan Vickers 2,600 horsepower forward turbine, it was a popular choice for the Liverpool Expresses, finally being rebuilt with 4 cylinders in 1952 as Princess Anne. Now let's have a contemporary look at Lizzie.
This is Ian Riley's Locomotive Engineering Works at Bury in Lancashire. As you can see and hear, it's quite a noisy and busy environment. Princess Elizabeth is currently inside the works undergoing attention following an incident on the West Coast Main Line on Sham, and the engine's in a partly dismantled condition. However, that gives us an opportunity to look at some of the workings of the locomotive, which we're now going to take the opportunity to do. So this is Princess Elizabeth, a very pivotal engine in the LMS. It introduced the big engine policy under Sir William Stanier and revolutionised West Coast Mainline express running. When the engines were first built, there was a considerable problem. The cylinders were capable of beating the boiler, which didn't generate enough steam. So some considerable amendments were made, including a combustion chamber, changing the tubes and almost doubling the superheater area, after which these engines became a formidable force, successfully hauling 500-ton trains from Euston to Glasgow at considerable speeds. These are the inside cylinders and valves, and these bear a direct resemblance to those on a King. These inside cylinders drove onto the leading axle, the outside cylinders onto the centre axle. And here we can see this piston valve's got the cover off, the piston valve's out, there's the liner and the valve ports inside, which distribute steam down to the cylinders. Down here we've got the cylinder drain cocks to release condensed water from the cylinders, and a modern fitment, the TPWS system, that enables the engine to work on specials on the main line. This is a fitment you wouldn't have seen on Princess Elizabeth when she was built. It's been fitted by the current owners, the Princess Elizabeth Locomotive Society, and it's a steam air compressor to enable the engine to work air brake stock on trips on the main line. Coming further back here, we have the outside cylinders, and you can see this one's got the cover off, and you see the steam ports up here, and of course long travel piston valves, a Swindon hallmark bought by Stania, which were one of the reasons for the success of the locomotive. These outside cylinders drove onto the centre axle, divided drive, again typical of the King and the Swindon designs of Collet and Churchwood, to whom Stania acknowledged he owed so much. Back here we've got the crosshead, in this case we can see the connecting rod's been removed, combination lever of the valve gear and the slide bars, and these are directly of the Swindon pattern as you'll see on Kings and Castles built at Swindon. Later locomotives in the class didn't have this pattern of slide bar, and it was in fact this crosshead and the white metal running out of it when the engine had got to Glasgow on the record-breaking run that kept Robin Riddles up all night at St Roch's Works remetalling the shoe so it ran properly. With the engine dismantled and the leading driving axle taken out, you can see here the slides where the axle box would normally fit, and again Swindon practice was bought, which vastly improved the riding qualities of the Princesses compared to even more recent engines like the Royal Scots. Up here we've got the mechanical lubricator and it's derived from the motion, and this provided pumped lubrication to a lot of the running gear on the locomotive.
Mike Lee met Clive Maugenier from the Princess Elizabeth Locomotive Society to discuss Lizzie's 1936 record-breaking run.
I gather the run nearly didn't happen, did it?
That's correct, yeah, because they found a problem the night before the run was due to take place.
And this was a steam pipe joint, I think, wasn't it?
Yes,
or something?
yeah, it was a steam cone, I think, that was a problem.
Right. And the story has it, how true it is I don't know, but that one of the senior officers at crew was phoned up when he was having tea on a dark Sunday evening, and told to get a cone joint out of the stores.
Yeah.
He had a guest with him who was a farmer who had a car, so he was recruited to drive down to the works. They picked up a retired storekeeper.
That's correct, yeah, because obviously the works would have been in darkness being on a Sunday, and they had to get it, the instructions from Riddles was to get it on the last train from crew, which was 6:40, and he would meet it personally at Euston to pick up the spare part.
So how on earth did they find it in the dark?
Well, when they picked up this retired storekeeper, obviously he had massive knowledge of the stores,
works, yes,
and the works, and he managed actually to find it, despite the place being in darkness.
So it's amazing how things that look like a major triumph have all these sort of little difficulties. And I understand that Robin Riddles didn't get to bed in Glasgow either, did he?
No, that's correct, because they had a problem after the first section of the run in any case when they ended up in Glasgow.
And I know he was there all night, I think, at the works in Glasgow,
That's
remodeling
right.
the
That's
crosshead
right.
slip.
That's right,
yes.
ready for the next day, yeah.
So, but nevertheless, an engine that really put the LMS on the map.
Now let's look at number 6203, today preserved by the Princess Royal Locomotive Trust at Butterley. The boiler modifications that enabled Princess Elizabeth to smash the London-Glasgow record in both directions were incorporated in the subsequent production from number 6203 on. She was initially preserved by Sir Billy Butlin at his holiday camp near Pwllheli in North Wales, and is seen here being transported very gingerly over Barmouth Bridge on the Cambrian coastline, round the tight curve at Dovey Junction, and over Talladig Summit to Butterley. Then began a massive overhaul. The boiler was stripped of tubes and front tube plate, and hours of skilled precision work put into rebuilding it to mainline running condition. the frames were fully stripped down, the size of the new superheater flues giving some idea of the scale of this engine. The rear frame stretchers and rear trailing truck all received attention, along with cylinders, motion, pipework, lubrication and braking systems. The tender was not neglected. It was lifted and the frames refurbished before re-wheeling using a steam breakdown crane. Finally, the body was remounted on the frames. With the boiler back in the frames, painting and fitting work was in hand. With her nameplate in place and finished in BR red livery, the engine is a magnificent sight. Handsome is as handsome does. Number 46203 Princess Margaret Rose restarts a train uphill on the North Wales coastline. Elder sister, number 6201 Princess Elizabeth, has also visited the Midland Railway Trust at Butterley, and having collected the single-line train staff, provides evidence of the power under the driver's hand. Back on home territory, Lizzie uses that power to storm southbound up the gradient past Harrison's works towards Shap Village, giving a fair imitation of Driver Clark and Fireman Fleet's record run of November 1936. Number 46203 glides downhill with an all-red liveried train. On another favourite Lizzie stamping ground, number 6201 coasts into Bangor on the North Wales coastline, giving an opportunity to examine the workings of the valve motion as she stops and restarts from a signal check. These next sequences really say it all. in 1956 to deputise, and in the 1990s for pleasure, Lizzie's went to visit King Country, as seen here at Exeter St David's. Lizzie's went off the main line into the sunset in 1962 to be less than adequately replaced by 2,000 horsepower diesel electrics. We owe a debt of gratitude to the two preservation bodies that have striven to enable us to enjoy the sight and sound of one of Britain's most elegant designs into the Pendolino era. Tragedy at Harrow. The Harrow and Wealdstone crash was one of the worst disasters ever to befall the British railway network, with hundreds killed and injured. This dramatic newsreel, filmed at the scene of the crash in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, reveals the catastrophic damage that can be unleashed in a high-speed train collision.
Three trains were involved in the appalling railway disaster at Harrow and Wealdstone. Each was full of people, and the station was also crowded, with the result that British Railways have suffered their worst accident. The clock stopped at the time of the crash. While the Tring to Euston train was standing in the station, the night express from Perth ran into it, causing fearful damage and chaos. Then the Euston to Manchester Express collided with the wreckage from the first collision. The scene has been described by an eyewitness as being like a battlefield. Certainly no exaggeration, for casualties were on a terrible scale. Bandages were hastily improvised on the spot, and everything possible was done by all present to rescue and aid the injured. It was a grim and difficult task in the dreadful conditions prevailing. American troops from a nearby headquarters were quickly on the spot with invaluable blood plasma, but many of the injured were trapped in the wreckage. Their number could not yet be computed, nor was it known at this time how many had lost their lives in the tragedy. One thing, however, was already certain: the disaster was very great, the casualties very large in number. The whole country was shocked by the news, and everywhere the deepest sympathy was felt and expressed for the bereaved and for all who had been hurt.
Men of the footplate. The footplate of an express locomotive is no place for an untested driver. The skills and knowledge required to safely drive a steam engine are acquired through years of careful training, as this LMS training film clearly shows. Following the fortunes of junior railwaymen, this feature reveals some of the physical and academic requirements demanded of would-be drivers, blended with some amusing, if occasionally stagey, glimpses into the camaraderie of the engine shed.
Forward! This young fellow's name is Truey, starting work as a cleaner. Starting as a cleaner, are you, lad? Yes, sir. Leaving him in, Mr. Shaw, I'll look after him. That's it, we'll go to the stores now, lad, and get you some overalls and cloth. By the way, lad, have you got your rule book? Yes, sir. There it is. That's it, you can't go very far without the rules. Arthur! Truey, this is the chargeman cleaner. He'll tell you what to do. Arthur, I want you to get a set of men on 4237 for me. Righto. Come on, boy. Have you got your own book? Yes, sir. You know what to do with it? Yes, sir. Learn it. That's right, learn it.
Harry has started on the first stage of his career. From now until his working life is finished, he will be concerned with locomotives. Locomotives of all kinds and sizes, tank engines and tender engines, sturdy little shunters and giant expresses, heavy freighters and lighter passenger locomotives.
Better get on the chimney, young Harry.
Right.
Outside and inside, mind.
What do you think you're at?
Well, sir, they told me to do it.
Who did?
One of the chaps, sir.
Well, you're not a chimney sweep. As for you, any more of this larking about, I'll give you something to grin about. Get on with your work.
Harry's job as a cleaner is an essential preliminary to his career as a driver. As he goes about his work in the locomotive depot, he's learning all the time. He becomes familiar with the parts of a locomotive, learns their names and how they work. He gets to know the controls in the cab and what their functions are. Harry gradually gains in confidence and experience. He finds the work hard but interesting. Although Harry doesn't think of it in that way, he's one of the backroom boys, whose job it is to keep the 8,000 locomotives of the LMS in good running order. Besides cleaners, the shed staff includes fitters, boilersmiths, steam raisers, labourers, boiler washers, firing instructors and so on. Harry comes in contact with them all. If he's wise, he learns something from them all too. There are 200 motive power depots of various sizes on the LMS system. Day and night, year in and year out, locomotives are moving into and out of the sheds. Constantly, the job of cleaning, inspection and repairing goes on, a vital part of the behind-the-scenes service which makes railway travel the safest and most dependable form of transport in the world. At the locomotive depot there are classes, called mutual improvement classes, which Harry should attend. Here he will add theory to the practical knowledge he gains at his work. At first, it all seems very complicated, but soon the combination of practical experience and theoretical instruction produce their results. Harry is learning. More, he is becoming interested in what he is learning. He isn't content just to listen, he asks questions.
Good morning, Trent.
Good morning, sir.
You're 18 now, aren't you, Trent?
Yes, sir. 18 last month.
We shall want you to do some firing soon. Do you think you'll be all right?
I shouldn't wonder, sir. I hope so.
Well, you realise what we want you to know, Trent. General knowledge of the rules and regulations, especially those referring to hand and fixed signals. To describe the various parts of the engine, knowledge of the locomotive's equipment, and the proper method of firing.
Yes, sir.
Right. I'll see you on Monday at 10 and find out how much you know. Right, that's all, Trent.
Good morning, sir.
Oi, Harry, form one shirt.
Harry, I want you to go firing on Engine 7264. George Blake's gone sick.
Right. Give us a bucket of tools and a shovel.
What for?
Dig in the garden, of course.
What engine number 4?
7264.
Thank you. Did you know we're firing our first engine?
Yeah, it's all nice and Scott, ain't it?
Having passed satisfactorily his eyesight test, Harry gets his first job of firing. On the footplate, the driver and fireman work as a team, whether their locomotive is a humble shunter or a mainline express. Harry's chief responsibility, while he's acting as a fireman, is to maintain a good head of steam with a minimum amount of coal. This means that he must give careful attention to the fire. He must, too, regulate the supply of water to the boiler. He sees that bright headlamps are exhibited on the locomotive. He assists the driver in keeping a good lookout and, where necessary, operates the water pickup apparatus and the handbrake. Here now is where Harry's training and experience start to show results. He has progressed to the first stage in his career as a driver. As a past cleaner, Harry will not be on regular firing work, but will be available to carry out a fireman's duties as and when required. Harry and his driver prepare the engine for the day's work.
I'm feeling a bit nervous now.
Oh, well, just a little bit.
Never mind, I'll help you all I can.
And that is typical of the men of the motive power depots, ready at all times to give valuable help and advice to the learner. It is now that Harry's knowledge of the rules and regulations stand him in good stead. This code of rules governs service in the railway and the operation of trains. Harry must know his rule book thoroughly, for on it depends the safe operation of the line. Every so often he will be seen by a firing instructor to make sure that his knowledge of it is still fresh. Harry soon progresses from shunting engines to runs with local freight trains. During his early trips, he will be accompanied by a firing instructor. There is an art in firing a locomotive furnace correctly, and it's no easy task to put each shovelful of coal through the small firehole door exactly where it is wanted. The coal must be spread evenly over the whole surface of the grate to obtain the maximum benefit from it. Throughout his career, this system of providing practical demonstration by expert instructors will be followed. Coupled with the facilities available for theoretical work, it provides a sound basic training which has been shown by experience to produce a steady, reliable and efficient type of man as you will find anywhere. Harry at this stage of his career leads a hybrid sort of existence. Sometimes out on the road as a fireman, sometimes in the shed cleaning engines, or doing one of the 101 jobs that require to be done. The trips that Harry takes on freight trains take him further and further from his home station. Every driver must know the road over which he travels. Harry's firing trips enable him to learn the road against the time when he becomes a driver. He must know the location of signals so that he can pick them out easily by day or night, obtain knowledge of speed restrictions, where water troughs are located, must in fact know the line over which he travels as you know the street in which you live. Whether he's on the line or working in the depot, Harry is learning all the time.
Harry! You're doing a regular firing job next week. Ask him in the office when you're to see the doctor.
Good, that's fine.
It's goodbye now to cleaning for Harry. As a regular fireman, his shed work in the depot is over. But he still has much to learn, and all the time he attends classes and studies at home so that he can pass the examination which will enable him to reach the goal of his ambition and become a driver. His experience broadens. He fires on differing types of freight trains and becomes familiar with differing types of locomotives. His work takes him for longer runs, and he learns the road on new stretches of line. He has become a permanent member of one of that most responsible class, the men of the locomotive footplate.
lucky employer, Jim. You're going to start driving, aren't you? Yes, that's right. But you're not doing so badly, Harry. Remember, I'm a good few years older than you.
Just as Harry Trewin is typical of the men who join the railway as cleaners, Jim Hawkins is typical of those in the next stage of a footplate man's career. Jim is a regular fireman. He is undergoing an examination to become a passed fireman, which means that he will be available for driving as and when required. He must be able to name the parts of a locomotive and describe their functions, know how to make and use trimmings, be able to spot where repairs are required, and to report them accurately. The examination is a searching one. The inspector, who is actually in charge of the locomotive, takes Jim with him on the footplate. Among the points on which he will have to satisfy his examiner are such things as the care and manipulation of the locomotive, attention to signals, judging distances, and attention to boiler and fire. The test will take place on both passenger and freight trains. To become a passed fireman, Jim has to satisfy his examiner that he is capable and efficient. As a fireman, Jim has always had his driver to rely on. When he drives, he will be the man in sole charge of the locomotive. This examination is the most difficult and crucial of his career. The demands are exacting, as indeed they must be, for the safe working of the railway is involved. The inspector notes Jim's actions, asks questions, watches for any errors he makes.
Now, Jim, what are your chief duties when working a train?
Observe and obey all signals.
What should you specially examine with regards to coal on tender and fire lines before leaving the local?
See the coal is safe and the fire irons secure.
Right. What is the correct amount of vacuum that should be created on the vacuum gauge, Jim?
21 inches.
Right. What are your duties so far as coal consumption is concerned?
Avoid making unnecessary smoke and
Yes?
and blowing off.
Right.
Theory is not omitted. The rules and regulations, which have been Jim's constant companion since he started work as a cleaner, have now become of supreme importance. He must know them thoroughly, and particularly those that have reference to the operation of trains. Past fireman Jim Hawkins is officially handed his own copies of instructions connected with his work as a driver. He must too sign the route card to show which routes he knows, experience which he has gained during his career as a fireman. No driver is allowed on the line until he has signed a road card covering the routes with which he is familiar. Jim is no stranger to the footplate. As successively a cleaner, past cleaner and fireman, his whole working life has been centered round locomotives. The system of training men for the footplate has been carefully devised to ensure that nothing is lacking, either in practical working experience or in theoretical training. Different classes of locomotives are designed to haul particular types of trains. So, as time goes on, Jim handles an increasing variety of locomotives and trains. He becomes a regular driver. At stated intervals, all drivers have to pass tests in the rules and regulations. Their knowledge of them is never allowed to get stale. In his off-duty periods, Jim studies, so that his knowledge will keep fresh. Jim is switched from driving freight trains to passenger train working as circumstances require. He has developed into a good, steady and responsible type of driver.
the slower schedules of freight working are mixed with the faster, more exacting schedules of passenger train running. Jim Hawkins is now firmly established in his career as a driver.